Hello, Daily Bible readers. This is our day 205 preview of our reading of the New Testament and of Genesis. Today's reading will cover the book of Revelation, chapter 13. Now, in yesterday's video, in chapter 12, we began to see a clearer image, as clear as any image is in the book of Revelation, but a clearer image of the development of the Roman Empire in opposition to the Lord's church, and how that is a sort of we'll call it a tool of Satan. How we saw the beast, the serpent, the accuser, Satan represented as the dragon that was trying to eat the man child born of the woman, and we developed that woman into ultimately into the church, and her children being the those to whom the dragon was trying to persecute, as he was unable to defeat the child of the woman, or to devour the child of the woman, as he had been seeking to do since the very beginning of time. And so as we come into chapter 13, we're introduced to a couple of more rather ominous creatures. In fact, the first one is represented as a beast that comes out of the sea. Before we get to that beast, there's a note we need to make in verse 1. In the New King James, it says, "Then I stood on the sand," and that seems to be a poor choice, we'll say. The I there is that the wording there should not be referring to John, as John standing on the sand of the sea, but actually of the beast that we see in chapter 12 and verse 17. He, or the dragon that's enraged at the woman, he's the one standing on the sea, and then out on the sand of the sea, and then out of the sea, where he's going to bring forth a beast. And this is a rather ominous looking beast here. He's got 7 heads and 10 horns, and his horns have 10 crowns, and on his head a blasphemous name. Now, one distinction that is going to be made between the dragon from chapter 12 and the beast of chapter 13 is that the beast in chapter 13, his crowns are in a different spot. In the dragon in chapter 12, the crowns were upon his head. In chapter 13, these crowns are going to be upon his horns. In other words, each of the horns, the powers, we might say, has its own individual sort of rule. Now, if you're familiar with the book of Daniel, in Daniel chapter 7, it's fairly easy. I say easy. It's helpful to be able to look there and recognize the beast that Daniel sees in his visions as this same beast that is coming up out of the waters. In fact, Daniel chapter 7, as Daniel has this vision of these 4 beasts, it's told to him that each of these beasts represents a king or a kingdom that's going to follow, sort of like the kingdoms of the vision of Nebuchadnezzar's statue. But what's great about this particular vision of Daniel is Daniel asks for an interpretation, and he's given one. And so I would encourage you to read Daniel chapter 7, but pay close attention to verses 23 through 25, where some of that explanation is given. And I think as we read this, and we're going to go ahead and read this in Daniel, I think you'll see how it corresponds to Revelation 13. It says in verse 23, "The fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all other kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, trample it, and break it in pieces. The 10 horns are 10 kings." What are the 10 horns? They're 10 kings. Now you know. "Who shall arise from this kingdom? And another shall rise after them, and he shall be different from the first one, and shall subdue 3 kings." Now, this is a little bit of, again, visionary type interpretation, but remember, we have 4 beasts in Daniel, which represent 4 kings. And this fourth king, or this fourth kingdom, this fourth beast, is not like the other 3, but it has drawn from those. And so the kingdoms that came before the kingdom of Rome, or the empire of Rome, are absorbed into this kingdom. And so he shall subdue those 3 kings. He shall be greater in power than they. Now, verse 25 says, he shall speak pompous words against the Most High God. We might call that blasphemy. He shall persecute the saints of the Most High. Well, that's what's happening in the Roman Empire and the reason for the book of Revelation. And shall intend to change times and law. Then the saints shall be given into his hand. He's going to persecute them. How long do you think that'll happen? See if this sounds familiar to you. For a time and times and a half time. Well, we saw that in chapter 12. We're going to see that again in chapter 13. And so that time range there just continues to repeat itself and point us back to the prophecies that were made prior to that. And so going back to Revelation chapter 13, again to this beast, remember he has 7 heads indicating perfection. Also seems to indicate perhaps 7 emperors that would sort of take the time of this. It doesn't have to represent 7 completely, because obviously it's representing a complete a completion of something, and so each head doesn't have to represent an emperor, though it's possible through a little deduction to kind of put a name on each of these heads. There are 2 heads in particular that are going to be of the most prominent for us. But we have these 7 heads and 10 horns. Those are horns of power. Horns represent power, and again, they're wearing crowns, and so they have a victory. But notice that on his heads, there's a blasphemous name. There's blasphemy against God. Almost from the standpoint, we might think, I'm going to call myself God. It's about as blasphemous a thing as you can do. And that's what these emperors in the Roman Empire will end up doing. Now, this beast, which he saw, was like a leopard and like a bear and like the mouth of a lion. Those are those other 3 beasts from Daniel 7. And the dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. Now, remember, the dragon represents Satan in this vision. And it's in his inability to bring about the devouring of the Son of Man or to keep down Christianity's birth, he's then going to, we might say, raise up an ally and give him, well, what power does he have? He has the power of lies. And so Satan, through this power of lies, is going to empower this last king, this kingdom, to carry out his will and his opposition. Now, one of those heads, verse 3, is going to have a mortal wound in it. Now, one of the most prominent, or one of the first, maybe is the best way to say it, one of the first emperors to really bring persecution against the Christians is going to be Nero. And we discussed him a little bit in our introduction as a possible primary character in this. But Nero dies in AD 68. And so even before the destruction of Jerusalem. And so he is likely the head that has the mortal wound. But there's going to be another head. So you cut off one head and 2 rise up. Well, this mortally wounded head will be healed, and all the world marveled and followed the beast. In other words, there's going to be a resurrection of great power in this kingdom, and that is seen as Domitian, who lived from or who ruled from 81 to 96. And so it seems that Domitian could possibly be alive still during the writing of this or have just died. Either way, the vision of this is going to be evident to the first century Christians who are reading this of how that all fits. So what happens? Well, they worship the dragon who gave authority to the beast. The Roman Empire is going to grow in such power and prominence. It's said at times that the people lost faith in their old gods, but rather they gained faith in the empire, and the empire became their god. It provided them their wealth. It provided them their security. It gave them their hope in life. And so they began to worship the empire as being of great power. And of course, that's the lie of Satan. That is that government can give you great purpose and power and life when really all those things come from God. And so he's going to be given authority to speak these lies and these blasphemies, all the things going to happen for 42 months. Verse 5. Well, there's that number again. 3.5 years. See it again and again. He opened his mouth to blasphemy against God. We talked about that in his tabernacle. Those who dwell in heaven, it's granted to him to make war against the saints. Verse 8 makes it clear. All who dwell on the earth will worship him. Those who have not been written in the book of life and of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. And so there's a division there, and that division is based off of worship. Who are you going to worship? Do you worship the empire, or do you worship the Lamb that was slain before the foundation of the world? If anyone has ears, let him hear this. That's verse 9, by the way. And however you live, that's the way you're going to die. Whether you live by the sword, you'll die by the sword. If you lead into captivity, you'll die in captivity. And whether that is the oppressor or whether that is the ones being oppressed, it doesn't matter. How you live, how you worship during this will determine your outcome. Now, along with that beast that comes up out of the sea, there's also going to be a beast that comes up out of the earth. It seems a little more docile. It has two horns like a lamb, but it's not the lamb. It has a religious aspect to it, but it speaks like a dragon. In other words, it breathes out fire. And how is that going to fit into the Roman Empire? Well, you can't very well have a kingdom that's worshiped unless you have a system by which to worship that king. And so this is going to be a religious aspect of the Roman Empire that directs worship to the emperor. The emperor will take possession of the idea of being the god of the empire and therefore worthy of worship. In fact, there are emperors who demand worship, requiring you to hail Caesar, to pledge your allegiance to the emperor, not the empire, but to the emperor as supreme God in order to receive the benefits of the empire. Well, that's the second beast. He's going to exercise all the authority of the first beast, and he's even the one whose head was wounded. He's going to perform great signs, miraculous. He's going to do some miraculous things for you, even calling down fire from heaven, it would seem. He was granted this power to give breath to the image of the beast. In other words, he's going to give form to that in such a way that it makes him viable as a god. I guess is the best way to put it. How is this? How can the emperor be God? Well, let me show you how he's God, in that he provides all that you need in life. He is the provider of life. He is the provider of all things good. That makes him the God. And so the system of this religious aspect of the Roman Empire will create that. He'll cause all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand and on their forehead. Now, there's a lot of questions about this mark, a lot of questions you won't find even a historical record to. And so, for that reason, just like the mark of those 144,000 marked by God, I don't see this as being an actual physical mark of any on anyone. We find no historical record of anyone receiving a physical mark in their head or on their hand to support that this was an actual mark that occurred on someone, but rather, as they live their life for that emperor, it becomes a mark of who they are. They are wearing his colors, we might say, and it's easily recognized who you belong to. Do you belong to God, or do you belong to the empire? And so there, it doesn't, and that goes for all. You can't say, "Yeah, I'm going to follow God, but I got enough money I can pay my way out of this." The empire had grown so large. Remember, the whole world is worshiping the empire. In fact, who can stand against the empire or the emperor in this case? You've got to submit your allegiance to him as your God. If not, you won't receive that mark. And remember the opening of the third seal, the one that came out with the scales, you won't be able to purchase. So here's wisdom. Let him who understands calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. The number is 666. Now, another one of those things in Revelation that gets a lot of attention and doesn't mean near as much as what you think it does. In fact, the definition of 666 is right there in the verse. It's the number of a man. We've talked about 7 throughout the book of Revelation as being that which is complete and perfect, and man is not that. Whatever system of worship that the empire or the emperor or the second beast and the religious system puts together is still just a device of man and will come to an end. It's not something worthy. It's only a 6 out of the 7. It will never be a 7. It will never be complete. And the only thing to make it any worse than just being 6 instead of 7 is to make it 6 and 6 and 6. No matter how many times you repeat it, it's still not complete. It's still not 7. It's just the number of a man. So these have been my thoughts on Revelation chapter 13. I hope they've been helpful for you. And as always, our prayer is that you allow the Word of God to be a lamp unto your feet and a light unto your path.